Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The president was in Atlanta today at the Atlanta University Center Consortium there, and pushing the idea that we desperately need a voting rights reform. We need to expand the right to vote to everyone. While, we've got Republicans across the country doing their darn foolhardy best to ensure that, not everyone has the right to vote, or at least making it a little more difficult for folks to, because, as Paul Wayrick said, I don't want everybody to vote. We want our people to vote. Our leverage goes up as the voting populace goes down. And that's been, for the last 40 plus years, the Republican way of doing things. And I give President Biden credit, finally, a Democrat showing some spine. One of the lines that jumped out at me, and there were a bunch in the speech, whoever's doing the speech writing, thumbs up to you. And the president has been delivering them forcefully, and I think in a way that we need them. He says, look, I've been having these quiet conversations with members of Congress over the last two months. I'm tired of being quiet. It's now time to start calling people out. It's now the time to take this stuff to the streets. And I had somebody go, why is he, going to Georgia? Why is he out on the road? Why is he doing this stuff? He should be in D.C. getting stuff done. And you go, look, they're at a deadlock. There's nothing happening. Manchin, Sinema, nothing's happening. None of the agenda is going to move forward. And Biden has finally realized small window to actually get something done. And he's got to get out and he's got to rally support. He's got to get out and do what, look, I give the former guy credit, or as President Biden calls him, the defeated former guy, like the little jab, but like the defeated former guy did it. I was saying at the time, he knows how to rally a crowd. He knows how to get people active and engaged. He knew how to get people, lighting up the phone lines and writing letters to the editor and pushing for the agenda. Now, their agenda was horrible. Tax cuts for the rich and hatred for everyone else. But he did it better than, I think he's done it better than any president in my lifetime. Like, Obama, no. He rallied his troops, I think, better than anyone to do the kind of things. Look, come on. And I think January 6th backs up my statement. They were literally willing to hang the vice president because he had riled them up and rallied them into such a frenzy that they were willing to burn our democracy to the ground for him. And this is the kind of, now I'm not saying I want people burning the democracy to the ground or doing what they did on January 6th, but I think calling representatives, I think getting out in the streets and rallying and demanding that we get some voting rights legislation passed through, we get something on the Build Back Better, we move the agenda forward. I think we need that, and I think the president understands it, which is why he was in Georgia saying, look, won this state. We want to keep it in a blue fashion, but we want to make sure that the people who were able to vote in the last election are going to be able to vote in the next election. And that's what this is really about. He goes on to say we have no option but to change the Senate rules, including getting rid of the filibuster for him to get the voting rights done. Because, look, Republicans continue to block this. Now you go, but Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema. Yeah, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema. But in a functional democracy, in one where people actually believed the things that come out of their mouth, as Republicans claim they want people to vote, had they actually believed that, we wouldn't need Manchin and Sinema. In fact, someone sent me a list of the 16 Republicans who voted to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act back in 2006. Marsha Blackburn, still in the Senate. Roy Blunt, John Boozman, Richard Burr, Shelley Moore Capito, West Virginia. Susan Collins. Where is Susan Collins? John Cornyn, still in the Senate. Crapo from Idaho. Lindsey Graham. Where's Lindsey been? Chuck Grassley, Jim Inhofe, Mitch McConnell, Jerry Moran, Richard Shelby, John Thune, Roger Wicker. The majority of those people still in the Senate. Not one of the 16 of them have voted for this, for Joe Manchin's piece of legislation. Not one. Now remember, Manchin said can't have the For the People Act. Can't have that. Too much. Liberal wish list, he said. So he rewrote the whole damn thing and got some, look, there's some good stuff in there. Some stuff that nice compromise. Not one Republican voted for it. Now he believed 10 were going to happen. He believed that 10 Republicans would come forth and go, yep, Joe, I'm with you. Good conservative, middle of the road Democrat, we're with you, buddy. We know you won't go too far. Weren't we told that was what was going to happen? That he was going to bring those votes along, and we wouldn't need filibuster reform because the filibuster would be there for the extreme stuff, not the stuff we agree on, because we agree, at least in theory, that everyone should have the right to vote. That we should make it a little bit easier. We should do some of the things that were in there, except if you're in the Republican majority in a lot of places, you don't want people to vote because if you look at the numbers, and this is purely a math game, we could probably get Andrew Yang on to explain it in a very I love math kind of way. There are more Democrats than there are Republicans. And if everyone gets to vote, Republicans are going to lose more elections. It's that simple. If they can't jerry-rig the maps, if they can't block and intimidate people from voting, they lose. It's that simple. So knowing what the maps are, knowing how this goes, they're doing everything they can to make sure that you or your neighbors don't get to vote. Now, this is Joe Manchin who said, well, I'm going to get 10. So today, interestingly enough, and you got to love the timing of it, and I'm still trying to figure out what the end game on Manchin's part is. But basically, as Joe Biden is in Atlanta giving a speech on, hey, we need to get this filibuster reform done. Hey, we need to do something about the filibuster to get voting rights legislation passed so we don't have the kind of things that we're expecting in this next election. Joe Manchin doubles down. Doubles down on his support of the filibuster. He says, we need some good rules changes to make this place work better, but getting rid of the filibuster doesn't make it work better. And I'm going, explain that a little bit? Because I've always said the filibuster is what Republicans and Democrats have used over the years to make sure that good things don't happen. Now you go, but Rick, they block some bad stuff, and that's true. And this is where me, as someone who believes in democracy being participatory and voters actually caring about issues, because the one that comes back to me, but if Republicans get power, Rick, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to destroy Social Security and Medicare. They're going to wipe it all out on a majority vote. And I go, do you think they really will? Do you think the wrath of their voters? Now, granted, they're not going to hurt their voters at this moment, but what we've learned in the past is grandma still cares about the grandkids. So if they destroy Social Security, they wipe it out, you think they're going to have voters around? And then if you have, the swing to the other side, wouldn't they restore it? And then don't you find some level of middle ground where you go, we're just not going to touch that? Because Social Security was one of those third rail of politics. Can't touch it. Everybody loves it. Republicans, independents, Democrats, all of them. Everyone loves it because it's anti-poverty insurance. We all know we're going to get older. We all know eventually down the road we're going to need it. So we don't touch it until George Bush, until the last couple of years where they've been trying to convince us and convince young people, well, it's not going to be there for you because all those old geezers are sucking it dry. It's the divide and conquer game. And they do it so well. And voting rights is part of this. Now, again, I come back to, as the president pointed out today, not a single Republican has displayed the courage to stand up to a defeated president to protect America's right to vote. Not one. And that is the problem and a sign of a dysfunctional democracy. When you have not one Republican who's going to say voting is important. We want to expand that. We want to make sure everyone has that right. It's the Constitution. It's what our foundation is built upon. Nope, can't have that. And look, I focus on Manchin and Sinema because I hope they're better than that. I expect obstruction and gridlock and delay from Republicans because it's all they've shown me over the last 45 years. But from Manchin, I would have expected a little bit better. No, I mean, the compromise on the filibuster, and has been my position from day one. I say you don't chuck the entire filibuster. You go back to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, a talking filibuster. If it is so important that this bill cannot move forward, then nothing moves forward. And that you then hold the floor. You continue to discuss and debate and make your case on why this is bad. And look, we've seen in the past where a handful of these have happened in the past, where people bring in the phone book or the Bible or whatever, and that's fine too. But the American people should see what's going on. This kind of backroom filibuster stuff that goes on where we don't even know who's filibustering what because you can't hold them accountable, that is problematic. I'm a big fan. Go back to the talking filibuster. That's the way to go. But Manchin and Sinema don't seem to be coming along, and they're certainly not a Republican going to go that route either. Now, while the Democrats are out there saying, hey, we want everyone to vote because that's the way forward, the Chamber of Commerce, meanwhile, the Chamber of Commerce, the moneyed interests, don't care about people voting, don't care about any of that stuff. They held their virtual conference today. They had a big to-do. This is laying out for their members across the country what the agenda going forward, basically who they're going to be backing, what issues they're going to be backing. And look, you seriously have to give them credit. They can spin a yard. They really can. I mean, their CEO, this Suzanne Clark, much better than the former guy, Thomas Donahue, in giving the spiel. A little more likable, a little softer around the edges, but still in the free market decides everything. We want free market in every way, shape, or form. They came out and said what we know they're going to do. They're going to fight against tax increases because they don't want to pay for anything. They want everything. They want the freeload. They're against regulations. We knew that. But one of the lines that grabbed me from her that I thought was interesting. She said, we have to be as loud as the extremists. We have to be as passionate about our interests as those on the far left and the far right. And that's tax cuts for businesses and the wealthy and deregulation. And I always find it interesting that, we deregulate and people die, but we never hold anyone accountable for it. But one of the things that got me is, this Suzanne Clark called for mass immigration. And this is one of the first times I've heard them call for it in this way. Very out front, increase the number of immigrants coming into the country by massive amounts. And, which should be music to the ears on the left of the pro-immigration crowd. But understand, the Chamber of Commerce doesn't care about human rights. They don't care about people. They don't care about the issues and asylum or any of that stuff. They simply want cheap, exploitable labor. And this is where this is coming from. As we're having this great resignation of workers saying we're no longer going to put up with intolerable conditions. We're no longer going to put up with poverty wages. We're no longer going to put up with abuse, from customers and from managers. We're no longer going to put up with an environment where we have crummy health care. They're now saying, well, if you're not going to do it, if you're not going to put up with intolerable conditions at poverty wages, we will bring people in who will. And, this has been the argument for a much more robust immigration system for a long time from a number of people. You bring folks in from other countries. They're going to do some of the jobs that, quote unquote, Americans won't do. And I argue they won't do it in the conditions and at the wages that are being offered. That's the caveat. But this is one of those things that, as we're reshoring manufacturing, as we're looking to rebuild our manufacturing prowess, this is one of the things the chamber has caught on to. And it's going to be interesting for me to see how the advocate crowd, who has tended to be, Democratic supporters and left, how this is going to work out on the Republican side. Because remember, the chamber is their money pot. Remember, the chamber is where the Republicans get their campaign cash. So will we see a change in tune in immigration? And what is that going to mean for the Republican Party, who is already splitting in weird ways? I know on the left, a lot of people are going, oh, we need a Labor Party. And I agree. I think we should have a Labor Party. I think there should be a Workers' Party. Someone that focuses on labor issues. But on the right, you can see a splintering of white nationalists and the Proud Boy types say, no, we can't have immigration. We can't bring people in. We can't do any of these things. Again, going to be interesting to see how it plays out. When you've got someone with the power and the resources of the Chamber of Commerce saying, since we're not going to be moving overseas anymore, because understand, the Chamber of Commerce was the pipeline to China. If you wanted to move your company from the U.S. to China, they were the pipeline. They were the conduit. They were the folks who got you there. They are part of the problem of why we're in the mess that we're in. But now they're saying, no, since we're coming back, they're going to be the pipeline the other way of bringing people in. And look, this is a policy we're going to have to debate at some point. But I'm going to watch this in 2022 and see if this becomes a campaign issue. And how many Republicans jump on board just to keep the cash flowing. Now, understand, they're always going to back Republicans for the tax and the deregulation. But the cheap labor, I don't know. Going to be interesting. Got lots to get to today, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, what's going on in Russia and Eastern Europe? When we come back, I guess, going to maybe explain a little bit about what Putin's up to. The agreement between Russia and Germany over a pipeline, and much more. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the Battle of the Running Bulls occurred at GM's Fisher Plant No. 2 in Flint, Michigan. It marked the turning point in the Great Flint Sit-Down Strike. Company guards attempted to stop food deliveries to the strikers. When confronted, the guards cleared out and the food deliveries resumed. The guards, however, reported to the local police that strikers were holding them captive. The Flint police soon arrived, throwing tear gas into the picket lines and through plant windows. The sit-downers responded with plant fire hoses and slingshots loaded with door hinges. The police continued to launch tear gas at the picketers. Then the crowd pelted police with any debris they could find. It was at this point that the police began firing indiscriminately into the crowd, seriously wounding 16. Glenora Johnson of the Women's Auxiliary, speaking from the sound truck, called her women to action. She recollected in 1976, quote, that when I appealed to the women of Flint, I said, there are women down here, the mothers of children, and I beg you to come down here and stand with your husbands, your loved ones, your brothers, your sweethearts. Then I saw the first woman struggling, and I noticed when she started to break through and come down that a cop grabbed her coat, and she just kept coming. As soon as that happened, other women broke through, and the cops did not want to fire into the backs of women. When the women did that, the men came naturally, and that was the end of the battle. The Women's Auxiliary would continue to play a vital role throughout the strike.
Sit down, don't keep your feet. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down, you gotta be. Sit down, sit down.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Kanye West, I don't often talk about Kanye. There was that period when the defeated former guy was, they were buddy, a little chummy going on. I'm not quite sure what happened there. There was a fallout, but evidently Kanye now is going from the defeated former guy, evidently going to be meeting up with Vladimir Putin. And I saw this and I'm going, really? I had to actually look for a couple of stories from reputable sources, and there are a couple of stories out there. Evidently, he's planning a trip to Moscow. He's going to do his Sunday service show there, and Vlad's going to be his guest. And his handler, and this was the most curious part of this, his handler said he's going to make Russia his second home, and he's going to spend a lot of time there. And I'm like, great, maybe you make Kanye his first home there. Maybe you can bunk up with Steven Seagal. Just a thought. Anyway, lots going on in the former Soviet Union. Vlad's got a lot going on, and here to share some of it, because there's stories all over the place. We now find in the Senate there's some fighting over the pipeline, Ted Cruz, 100,000 soldiers on the Ukrainian border, all kinds of uncertainty, all kinds of stuff. That's why I've asked Max Bergman to come talk with us. Max is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, where this is his stuff. So this is the guy who should know. Max, thanks for taking some time for us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So walk me. Let's start with Kanye. Does this matter? I mean, Dennis Rodman used to go to North Korea, and him and I guess it was Il who had a friendship. Is this a big deal?
Well, if Kanye can prevent or convince Vladimir Putin not to invade Ukraine, I'd be happy to pin the Nobel Peace Prize on Kanye's jacket. But no, I think this doesn't really matter. I think this is sort of a distraction. But, it is sort of interesting that Kanye, rumored to go to Russia, given his sort of support for Donald Trump and Trump's sort of past relationship with Russia. And, the Russians are sort of known to do this, to sort of try to cultivate certain Hollywood stars that then have some attraction here. But I think this is pretty much a sideshow from the main event that's actually taking place.
No, and the main event is very serious stuff. I mean, I'm watching this story developing in the Senate with Ted Cruz and the Democrats. They've come to some agreement that Cruz isn't going to hold up a number of nominees, something like 30 nominees, if they have a vote on something that I think is popular within the Senate, not allowing Russia to have this pipeline. So there's a lot to unpack there. Can you explain what's going on in the Senate and what this, Nordstrom 2, Nord Stream 2 pipeline is?
Yeah, so the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, now this has been an issue going back for the last decade, really, that Germany is dependent on natural gas being piped in from Russia. And so Russia, through Gazprom, decided to build a pipeline through the Baltic Sea, basically avoiding Ukraine. If you think about it in terms of sort of like highway supply lines, like all the gas basically comes through Ukraine, and Russia wanted to get around Ukraine. And Ukraine gets all these fees for gas coming into Europe. And so this pipeline would basically give Russia greater leverage over Ukraine. It would make Germany much more dependent. Both sides of the aisle, there's a bipartisan agreement that this is not a good pipeline. Obama opposed it. Trump even opposed it. But the Republicans weren't proposing these sorts of sanctions and taking these sort of obstructive measures when Trump was in office. And so what's really happening is that Cruz is sort of really kneecapping and hindering Biden's foreign policy. He's holding up all these nominees because we have a 50-50 Senate, means that you have a tie in committee. So none of these people can get through. He's put blanket holds. And so we don't have, for instance, an assistant secretary of defense to oversee Europe when we may be on the brink of war. I mean, it's totally crazy where we are right now. And so this is an effort to sort of just placate Cruz. This is a pipeline that Biden doesn't support. But what Cruz is proposing is to sort of put sanctions on Germany. And where there's a division is the Biden administration has negotiated with Germany to try to get them to sort of back away from the pipeline. I think they've made some progress. And Cruz just wants them to basically punch Germany in the face. And so the Biden administration is like, we don't want to do that. And, I think this has ultimately sort of made a mountain out of a molehill. But their view is that if we concede to Cruz here, then, he's just going to take another pound of flesh. I think ultimately this is sort of a distraction, though, because this pipeline isn't even operational. But it has become the major focal point of the Senate. And instead of the Senate being sort of united in backing Ukraine and sort of backing a strong European response, Ted Cruz is sort of, and the Republicans have been causing all sorts of problems and forcing a vote on legislation that the administration doesn't want.
Yeah, and in the world of foreign policy, where they're really not supposed to be fiddling around it, and this is one of those things. I had someone today, tell me though, but the Democrats did this kind of stuff to Donald Trump, so this is just payback. Is it a good reason for this?
Well, I don't really think Democrats did this, right? There were certain holds on nominees that Democrats were totally objected to and would refuse to vote for, but that's different. There's a lot of nominees that Ted Cruz is just frankly opposed to for no reason and has never articulated a reason. And actually, if they were brought up to a vote, would probably not object to them being voted. And so what we have here is just like an effort to sort of score political points when we have a really dangerous political situation. Now, in some ways, I think Cruz makes some good arguments, actually. And I think the Biden administration may be slightly misreading Germany in this situation, that I think you could levy sanctions against some of the people in Nordstrom 2 and not have it sort of create a rift with Germany. But every executive branch, every administration wants a degree of latitude to sort of conduct their foreign policy. So, I think some of this is sort of traditional sort of congressional sort of, poking the administration. But, Russia, we're on the brink of potential war here. We should really have a united front. This isn't the issue that really we should be fighting over, because everyone's sort of in agreement. It's a bad pipeline. It's really how we deal with Germany, who's our ally. Yeah, this is too much is being made of this, I think.
We used to have former Congressman Joe Sestak on the program often, and his argument was always that we should be opening up our ability to pump natural gas over to Germany and over to Europe to basically bankrupt the Russian state so that they weren't able to operate, because it's where they make their money. And he took a lot of heat for that, but there's kind of something, because Germany needs the energy. They're doing a lot in solar and renewables, but at the end of the day, if they need it, they're going to try and get it from somewhere. No.
Yeah, no. Europe, relies on Russia for 40% of their natural gas, and that gives Russia a ton of leverage. It's sort of that classic sort of cartoon where it's sort of Spider-Man and all sorts of superheroes pointing guns at each other, where Russia is dependent on the revenue coming from Europe, but Europe's dependent on the gas. And I think we're in a really dangerous situation when it comes to this potential conflict in Ukraine, that it's winter. The way Germans heat their home is through natural gas. And it's not out of the question that Russia would decide, if Europe decides to sanction Russia, and if Russia were to invade, Russia responds by cutting off gas, and the heat turns off the heat in the middle of winter for Western Europe. So we have a real crisis. I think, liquefied natural gas is a potential option, but this is really, it is time to have a wartime-like mobilization on the clean energy front. It's solar, wind, it's cheap.
Yep.
Like they just have to deploy it. And now this should be sort of motivation to just get out from under the thumb of Vladimir Putin and the Russians to really decarbonize.
Now, you've said a couple of times we're on the brink of war. And I don't think most people take that seriously, but when I see the story that there are 100,000 Russian troops on the border of Ukraine, we don't see that on the nightly news every night. But when I'm reading these stories, I'm going, that kind of posture just tells me, a flip of a switch, they're rolling in. And what do we do? Are we going to get into a gun battle? Are we going to get into a sanction war? What is that going to look like for us? You're the expert in this. Do you think this country would mobilize to have any military response?
Well, so let me just say first, this is really serious. When we think about 100,000 troops, it's roughly the same invasion force that the U.S. had in 2003 when it invaded Iraq. And you don't deploy that level of forces without creating a degree of momentum. Generals on the ground are preparing for war. You have tank crews that are bolting on missile cages. Once you start doing that, there's a certain momentum that is built up that creates sort of a drumbeat for war. So I think there is a real potential for Russia to invade Ukraine. The only person who knows if that's going to happen is really Vladimir Putin. Now, if he does, I don't think there's any military option for the United States here, right? Russia is a peer competitor. this isn't like ISIS, right? We can't just sort of waltz into Syria. This isn't like the Iraqi military. And we simply don't have, our forces are not, arrayed to just enter Ukraine and fight alongside the Ukrainians. So Ukraine will have to sort of fight on their own. We can provide them a lot of military assistance. But what would happen is that we would, deter Russia from going any further. But this would play out in terms of basically economic warfare. It would be sanctions, targeting of rich Russian oligarchs who park their money in the West in cities like London, New York, and Trump properties in Miami. And so it would be a huge back and forth, and the Russians would try to hit back at us, just like they did in the 2016 election, in interfering and attacking our democracy. So this would be a really intense situation. And when Russia, a big country, decides to try to invade and dismember a small country, that's the sort of thing that Europe hasn't really seen very much of since World War II. So it would have a real shock to the system and would be incredibly dangerous. The Russians would be on edge. Europe would be on edge. And the danger there is that's where miscalculation comes in, where, we still have nuclear weapons on hair trigger alert. Any sort of security crisis is a potential nuclear crisis. So I don't think we'll get there. I think there's been clear signaling from the Biden administration that, the United States is not going to get involved militarily. U.S. forces aren't going to be involved. But this is, let's be clear, incredibly serious situation.
Now, how much of this is, I've said for a long time, I think Putin and the Russians at the top, they want to get the old band back together and reestablish the former Soviet state. Is that part of this, or is that too much of a reach?
No, I think that's entirely accurate. Right? Vladimir Putin's a Russian nationalist. He came of age in the KGB during the Cold War, and he cares about, I think, two things. One is sort of corruption and maintaining the kind of corrupt economic system that Russia currently maintains. Maybe I'll say three things. Second thing is staying in power, and the third is Russia's geopolitical standing. That Russia sort of having a big presence in the world, and part of that is for him is reclaiming kind of the power of the Soviet Union. And when Ukraine broke away from the Soviet Union, became an independent republic after the end of the Cold War, for Putin, that was sort of a critical moment where Russia had sort of lost the key part of its power. And what's the basic gist of this crisis is that Ukraine, after 7 years of fighting with the Russians, doesn't want to have anything to do with Moscow. They want to have a democracy. They want to be integrated with the West. They want to join NATO and the European Union. And so Putin has lost Ukraine. And so what this is ultimately about is Putin can't stomach that and really wants to bring Ukraine back into the Russian fold. And the only way for him to do it now is through military force. Yeah. So that's, it's a Russian nationalist. It's not unlike, past fascist dictators that we've seen in the past trying to invade and take over small countries because they want to, rescue stranded compatriots, whether that was, Hitler in the 1930s trying to get, Germans that were in Czechoslovakia. So this is, incredibly dangerous. And if he succeeds and is successful and is seen as having sort of pulled this off and reincorporating Ukraine at very low cost, let's be clear, there's a lot of other countries around the world that want to do the same, China and Taiwan, but a lot, countries in Africa that want to sort of reclaim lost territories in Latin America. So it's really about maintaining a precedence that big countries can attack small countries, just something we sort of take for granted, but has been a key part of us actually living in a fairly peaceful world after World War II. We sort of take that for granted, but things can be a lot worse than they are.
No, you're absolutely. In fact, you jumped a little ahead on the Chinese part. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Max Bergman, Senior Fellow at the Center for American Progress. You want to check out their work, AmericanProgress.org, the website. Because for me, the Chinese seem to be in the background, benefiting from this, no matter what happens. And that's as we're involved in all of these other things. China keeps growing stronger and stronger and stronger as we're either, voiding some of our responsibilities globally or getting mixed up in places where we're tied down. They just keep getting stronger. And I fear this is part of all of that.
Yeah, no, I think, China is going to be watching this very closely. And the same thing was true in 2014 when Russia, frankly, seized Crimea from Ukraine, and then basically launched an invasion of eastern Ukraine. The Chinese were doing something similar in the South China Sea. They were building these sort of fake islands, trying to claim the South China Sea as theirs, encroaching on the territory of the Philippines and the Vietnamese. And they were both watching each other. And these are big autocratic states that want to sort of challenge the rules of the game. And they want to rewrite the rules of the international system so that might makes right, and so that they can basically, assert themselves over smaller, weaker countries and be great powers. In the United States, I think part of the problem is that at times in the past, we've been quite hypocritical and operated in similar ways. But right now, it's very critical. I think that any Russian invasion of Ukraine, should Putin decide to do it, be seen as immensely costly to Russia and be seen as a real strategic mistake, so that other countries like China are deterred from taking similar action. And so we'll see how it plays out. And frankly, the one thing I'd say is that the Ukrainians here, the Ukrainians have been fighting the Russians now for the last 7 years. Yeah. And I think if Russia did invade, that they'd have a fight on their hands. Now, the Russian military is far stronger, but what we'd be looking at is a potential insurgency along the lines of what we have seen in, the Middle East. And this could get really quite bloody, quite dangerous for Russian forces in Ukraine. It'd be a disaster for everybody. And so we really hope that talks this week, there's 3 different talks that are taking place, really, kind of just kick the can on this. And sort of part of diplomacy oftentimes is just, keep talking so, you don't start fighting. Oftentimes it doesn't result in much, but sometimes that's the whole purpose of it. And I think that's what we're sort of seeing this week.
As a kid growing up, in the 70s, it was always, we used to do those drills under the desk because the nuclear bombs could be dropping, because evidently Catholic school desks stop nuclear winter. I didn't know that, but this is an era that I don't want to see us back to, but it looks like, we're heading down this path. But Max, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing your expertise with us. And as this continues, and there's so much to talk about on this, I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts.
No, I'd love to. And let's just hope Kanye can get the job done.
There you go. Thanks so much, Max Bergman, senior fellow there at the Center for American Progress. Again, you want to check out their work, AmericanProgress.org, the website. Going to take a quick break right here. On the other side, some manufacturing stuff, a little bit about China, solar panels, the whole 9 yards. Back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day a strike launched one of the most iconic rallying cries of the U.S. labor movement. 20,000 mostly women workers in the Lawrence, Massachusetts textile mills began what became known as the Bread and Roses Strike. Led by the industrial workers of the world, the strike was one of the most important events in the history of women workers. The phrase bread and roses had been used a year earlier by poet John Oppenheim. He published his poem in the American Magazine. His first verse read, "As we come marching, marching, in the beauty of the day, 1,000,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses, for the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses." The second stanza continued, "As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through our singing, their ancient cry for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits knew. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too." The poem described a call by workers not just for bread or better wages for the basic needs of life. It also called for roses, a life that could include time for beauty and meaning. In 1976, Mimi Farina, the sister of Joan Baez, put the lyrics to music. In 2000, a filmmaker used the title Bread and Roses for his story of unionization efforts of Mexican workers in Los Angeles. And for the past century, the image of bread and roses has continued to capture the imagination of working people standing up for their rights.
As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days. For the rising of the women means the
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Wall Street Journal story today. They are saying that between Omicron and our supply chain problems, expect a slower growth year in the new year. This is according to the World Bank. The bank has forecast 4.1 growth for 2022. That's down from the 5.5% last year. I don't know if 4.1 is bad, but if we don't get this virus under control, if we don't get our supply chain issues done, if we don't reshore some manufacturing, we got problems, and it's not surprising here. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, how we undo what's been done, how we move forward, how we grow our economy in a way that encourages domestic consumption with domestic production. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. You want to check out the work that they do. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be with you as always.
So I'm looking at this and I'm going, common sense. If we don't get this virus under control, if we don't get these supply chain issues kind of figured out, we're going to have problems. Yeah.
So, we're in a lot of ways, we're back to where we started from at the beginning of the pandemic with some serious challenges, whether it's testing kits or PPE or what have you. And I think that part of the challenge here, and I'm just going to say it, is that we lean way too much on the good graces of multinational companies to do the right thing here. Okay, and I just think that's a huge mistake. There will be people who say, well, why should the government buy up a bunch of American-made face masks or testing kits and stockpile them? Well, there's a very good reason, and the reason is today. For instance, and so
preparedness.
Yeah. So we obviously, unfortunately, have to prepare for worst case scenarios. This is certainly something that the last administration didn't understand. And I think, unfortunately, we're still at a learning curve here, and it's because, honestly, so much of our kind of healthcare sector is privatized and is driven by profit, and I think it makes it exceptionally difficult. But we got to do a better job across the board of making sure that critical supplies, starting with things like N95 and masks and testing kits, and then moving on from there, that we're prioritizing those, and we're finding a strategy to have them produced in the United States. And there's not a simple answer to this. It's not just about throwing money at it. But you do have to invest in research and development, in capital. You have to find a way to offset some of the advantages that these firms find in going overseas, whether it's to exploit labor or be able to produce, without environmental controls or whatever. So trade policy is a part of this. And you have to also insist on Buy America, right? So that the government's procuring from our producers here in the United States.
Now, you said the key word, strategy. We need to have a strategy. Yeah. There needs to be a plan. Instead of this idea, and what we've been told, or at least what I've been told since I got out of school, that we're a capitalist society, we believe in free markets, and that the invisible hand takes in care of things, and that government. In fact, I watched the Chamber of Commerce spiel today on what their agenda is going to be for the new year. And it was all about free markets and don't let government touch anything because the free market, the free hand, the invisible hand, Scott. And this is what the invisible hand has gotten us. This is where we are in an environment where CEOs hooked on cheap labor and lax environmental regulations have abandoned this country, and we've paid for them to leave. And now we're saying, look what you've done.
Right. Yeah, they're all for government intervention if it involves a bailout for them in a time of need. They're all about socializing the risk and privatizing the profit. And unfortunately, that's not the common good. And the free market, yes, I tell you what, if everybody is playing by the same set of rules and has the same stakeholder interests, that is, you got to take care of your workers, you got to take care of the communities, you got to take care of your consumers, and you have to take care of the people who are investing in your company, and you're giving equal weight to all of that. And if everybody's doing that around the world, I suppose in some textbook that works perfectly fine, right? It does, because there's, some countries will have comparative advantages in something and some in another. But that's not the way it works in the real world. And you have governments that are blocking products, or that have their own policies that are subsidizing their own industries, or through allowing labor to be exploited or the environment to be degraded while things are being produced, is distorting the true costs of the product and being able to drive other companies out of business. I mean, you have to have a strategy to counter that. You can't say, I'm going to stand by my philosophy, because you'll be standing by your philosophy and you'll get a pink slip. And you'll see American industry and jobs vanish, and that's what's happened over the last couple of decades.
On paper, on paper everything works. When I was coaching football, every play I ever drew up scored a touchdown.
I'm sure every play was perfect, Rick. I have no doubt about it. There should have been why didn't the players just execute it, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's where it is, which is why today this group called the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. They had a digital event today and they were going to discuss how a national strategic industrial policy was going to be able to strengthen our ability to manufacture our critical supplies, the things that you were talking about, our PPE and the things that we need, but also, like the book that you guys wrote about 10 years ago with Tom Ridge on all the things that our military needs that we no longer produce. We need to have this kind of long-term thinking that the Chinese are very public about doing on the other side, and they are eating our lunch because they seem to have a plan, whereas, we're still going with the invisible hand.
Yeah. There's way too much of that, and I think the good news is, and I think the ITIF event is a good example of this, is that there's a greater awareness of the need for this, and we've talked about this before. We saw like little green shoots of this at the beginning of the Obama administration around the auto rescue and other things, but it was very temporary, it was very scattered, and then it kind of vanished, and then it disappeared altogether. And trade wasn't really a component of that. So now I think you see this reemerge again, and for good reason. But the pandemic, and then all of the shortages we've seen with things like semiconductors, and as we're heading into this clean energy future, the fact that we make virtually nothing here with respect to clean energy, whether it's batteries or solar panels or wind turbines or what have you. And so if we want jobs and a clean environment, we're going to have a strategy. So I think there's a greater awareness of this, and I think here's the good news. I think part of this is bipartisan. Okay, I think part of this is bipartisan. I mean, one of the few bills that the Senate passed on a bipartisan basis, other than the infrastructure bill last year, was the U.S. Innovation and Competition Act, which is designed to boost semiconductors, other key sectors. It's just a start. It's nothing like other countries do, but at least it gets us in the game, right? Because we've been on the sideline for a couple of decades, and so I think that's promising, but we have to follow through. Infrastructure was part of that. A trade enforcement strategy is another part of that. Build back better, investing in your people is a big part of that as well. And then making strategic investments in the industries that are going to matter to our future is also very important. And then just one final thing, and I said this before, but it's also about the government buying America. That if we're going to do this, if we're going to rebuild America, we got to make sure that we're sourcing American products.
Absolutely.
For that. And it's pretty simple. So you put that together, and we have great entrepreneurship. We have great productivity. We have a lot going for us. I think that we have great upside, great potential, but we do need that strategy. We need that policy, and we need that investment.
We need a vision. I mean, ultimately, that's what it comes down to. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org, the website, if you want to check out the work that they do. And now you've talked about Buy American, which is very popular on both sides, on all sides of every aisle. Very popular. In fact, Axios came out with a survey today on the solar panel front that said 83% of the people think that it's important that we avoid using tax dollars to purchase solar panels used by forced labor in China. That seems like a no-brainer to me. I'm surprised 17% said, yeah, okay, let's use slave labor panels. Another 80% agree that America should rely on domestically produced solar panels rather than Chinese imports. And 79% are concerned that the use of forced labor in China, in solar manufacturing, I would argue that goes to all manufacturing. So overwhelmingly, this stuff, nonpartisan and extremely popular. Why is it taking so long?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer. I mean, I looked at that poll and I both nodded in agreement, and I also, shook my head in disbelief, because we've been polling these issues for 15 years, and we know they're wildly popular among all categories of voters, Democrats, Independents, Republicans. They have been consistently for a long time. It was true no matter who was president. And so what holds this up is partisanship, and then interests on the other side. The interests who oppose that are big multinational companies who unfortunately have an outsized influence in Washington, D.C., right? And unfortunately, the people who write a lot of newspaper editorials. These are, journalism used to be a blue-collar profession. I know it is for you, Rick, but for a lot of the editorial writers, they haven't seen the inside of a factory. They have no idea what it's about. And so they dig into their college textbooks from economics, and they write editorials based on that, and it's poppycock. So I think that if you press these issues forward, and I think this is one of the many reasons. I think there are very substantive reasons too, but I think Joe Biden is not a political fool. I think he understands that there's both a tangible benefit to jobs in this country, to our security, and this is an issue that if he leans into, is going to attract some support. It's wildly popular.
No, it is, and the Made American thing is wildly popular. Resourcing our manufacturing the things that we need, very popular. The one knock that I will have against the administration, and Jen Psaki, I love. But when she was asked if we should be handing out testing kits, and she went on with that little spiel that she went on, I thought she was dead wrong when she said it. We should be handing out these testing kits like they're going out of style to get people tested, to help tap this down, and they should be made here. So it seems to me, if I have a knock against the administration, we haven't done enough so far. I don't know if maybe this is my view of it, and you've got a better advantage point than I do.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like we've ramped it up fast enough and gotten them out, wide enough to people. Or am I just being overly critical of this of the administration?
It's a good question, and so I will say the administration has made some efforts with respect to making sure that more of this is sourced in the United States. I think what happens if a company comes to them and says, look, we're doing all that we can, but we also got to bring some of this in from overseas right now. I think that a lot of folks are reticent to say, no, what you need to do is find a way to add more capacity in the United States of America. And so you still see some of this corporate resistance. I think the good news for testing kits is that there is a lot that is manufactured in the United States. And I think that not all of it, but a lot of it, of the really good kits are. I think that the bigger challenge still are things like KN95 or N95 masks, where the vast majority of those are shipped from overseas. Right. And it's for this very simple reason. The pharmacies, the Walmarts, the Amazons, the group purchasing organizations for all the medical community in the United States, they all want to make a buck. They want to make money off of this. And so they're going to source it from the lowest cost source per unit even if it's harder to control quality, even if it means that we're not going to be able to scale up our own capacity in the United States, which means if there is a global crisis, we won't be first in line for this stuff. We'll be last in line. And so I think we have to do a better job. Right. And again, the administration has taken a few steps, but I think everybody can do a little bit more.
No, I think we should have ramped up production. We should have ordered, hundreds of millions of them and handed them out. Avoid Walgreens, avoid CVS, avoid Rite Aid, avoid all of that, and just get them out. It just seems to me that should have been, if I do have a criticism, that's what we should have been doing.
Well, I think you're right. And just as an example, I don't know how things are where you are in central Pennsylvania, but in the DC suburbs, the libraries now have a supply every day, and you can go get up to 2 testing kits for free.
Wow.
Just wait in line at the library, and they're giving them out at the schools too for the kids. But it's taken a while. I mean, this is literally the first time that's happened. So,
a week and a half ago, I went looking for a test. None of the stores had one. I wanted one of the rapid at-home tests. You couldn't find it for love or money. And eventually I had to go jump through hoops to go to, like 30 miles away. And it was a lot. And you go, it shouldn't be this difficult. They should be available. They should be free. We should be doing them as often as possible to keep people, somewhat safe. Last question I've got for you in just about a minute. I did say a story that I thought right up your alley. We gained 349,000 factory jobs last year. Yeah. Is that good? Yeah. Is that where do you place that on the spectrum?
I tell you what, given all the challenges, I think it's pretty good. And here's why. We're recovering still out of this pandemic recession. Now, that's not a full jobs recovery from the beginning of the pandemic, but we're getting close, which I think is really good news. And the fact that a lot of people decided to leave the manufacturing workforce because it is one of those in-person occupations, Rick. As you know, you got to be there, and there's some risk that's associated with that, some health and safety risk. And so I think that despite a lot of those challenges, we saw this growth. I think we can continue it into next year. And so that's one thing that gives me a little bit of optimism that we are beginning to put a dent in this kind of jobs deficit in the factory sector and making a little bit of progress.
No, I saw it. Maybe we are doing some of the, not as fast enough, but maybe we are doing some of the reshoring, bringing some of those good jobs back. And maybe there's hope on the horizon. But Scott, as always, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Always good stuff, my friend.
Of course, Rick. Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be with you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul. Make sure you check out their website at AmericanManufacturing.org. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Have the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Today in Labor History, the year was 1912. This historic day marked the beginning of the Bread and Roses strike of textile workers in Lawrence, Massachusetts. The strike was led by the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW. The state of Massachusetts passed a law reducing the work week for women and children from 56 hours to 54 hours. On this date, a group of Polish women at one textile mill opened their paychecks to find their wages had been cut by 32 cents. They promptly walked off the job in protest. Soon they were joined by many more workers. The strike swelled to over 20,000 strikers representing more than 50 different nationalities, shutting down most of the mills in Lawrence. The strike proved that it was possible to organize women workers and to organize across ethnic lines, two groups that many union leaders of the day thought too difficult to bring into unions. Despite police violence against them, the strikers stood strong. They won most of their demands, including a 15% pay raise. But why did the strike go down in history as the Bread and Roses strike? The line fittingly came from a woman named Rose. In 1912, Rose Schneiderman, a labor leader and suffragist, said, "What the women who labor wants is the right to live, not simply exist. The right to life as the rich woman has the right to life. And the sun and music and art. You have nothing that the humblest worker has not a right to have also. The worker must have bread, but she must have roses too."
Them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread but give us roses.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You've got a thought, question, comment, something we've talked about, got under your skin. I'd love to hear 1-866-416-RICK. I look at where we are in this moment, and it's one of those things where you look at the fact that we've got so many unvaccinated people in the country, and it's defiance more than anything. And I've said for a while, several months now, that you're not going to be able to force people to do it. You're not going to be able to, you're not going to shame people into protecting themselves. It's just not going to happen. As a country, we're not going to throw people down and jab it in their arm. That's not going to happen. I've said capitalism will decide. And like most things, capitalism will figure it out. Mostly insurance companies. So as I said, I have a relative who, he's not vaccinated. His insurance company said, fine, you don't have to get vaccinated, but you're going to pay an extra $1,500 a year for your health insurance. Because what we know is if you get COVID, chances are you could go to the hospital. If you go to the hospital, we're going to spend lots of money taking care of you because we have no choice. And it just is what it is. You're more costly to insure. I'm looking at Quebec, the Canadian province of Quebec. Evidently, they have decided that they are they're not going to force people to get vaccinated. They're not going to shame them. They're going to say, we're just going to charge you a health care tax of, I think it was, the number I saw was 15%. So 15% of your wages, you'll kick in to your health care. And you go, this is just a way of going, hey, you're making up the healthcare costs. You're the ones who are, costing us so much money. That's what we're going to do. And here's where I point to. United's CEO, guy named Scott Kirby, and look, I don't often praise CEOs, but in this vein, he put out a letter saying, look, their company, United, has 3,000 people who have tested positive for COVID, and not one of those people have died. And he went as far to say is they haven't had any of their people hospitalized. So you've got all these people who have tested positive for it, but it hasn't risen to the illness level that they end up going to the hospital. Now, what this shows is what the insurance companies already know. Yeah, you might get it, but if you're vaccinated and you get the booster, and look, West Virginia is looking for a fourth booster, what they know is it's going to bring healthcare costs down, and they're not going to be hit with the liability. And I got to tell you, I think Jim Justice in West Virginia is thinking that as well, because the state does pay the Medicaid bill, and there are a lot of people in West Virginia who are on Medicaid, and you end up getting that. You end up going to the hospital. It could cost the state an enormous amount of money. Now, this Kirby in a memo said that since our vaccine policy went into effect, the hospitalization rate among our employees has been 100 times lower than the general population in the U.S. This going to be the capitalist model. This is what you're going to see companies doing. It is that simple, especially now when you saw that, what was it, yesterday? 1.3 million new cases of COVID in one day, hospitalizations soaring. I guess the day before it was like 1.1 million. You go, what? We're almost to 62 million people who have been infected with it from the beginning of this. We're getting to the point where eventually everybody's going to get it. Over the 7-day average ending Monday, you're talking about 740,000 new cases a day. Now, here's the weird part. There's talk overseas of the Omicron and the Delta all now coming together, and there's going to be another variant because, again, the longer we fiddle with this, the more it mutates, the more it figures out how to get around whatever we're using for it. It then becomes stronger. That could be a problem. So my view on it is we got stuff to do, and we should be taking care of ourselves, kind of staying away from each other. Again, the common sense stuff, things that used to be common sense. Get a decent mask, wear that. Socially distance, stay away from people when you can. Now, I was explaining this to my daughter. When you look at the fact that 1 million people in one day, 1 million people in one day were infected, that means 1 out of every 320 people. You run into that many people, over a 7-week period. You then drop that number down to what? 1 out of 50, 1 out of 40 people. You run into 40 people a day. The chances of you coming across someone who is infected gets greater and greater. Because there's a lot of people who want to think, that's over. It's not a big deal. People aren't dying at the rate that they were. Although, I'm listening to these folks who actually work in the hospitals. People are getting sick and dying. And what's interesting, and I talked about this yesterday. Conservatives have all these cures outside of the vaccine. This is the part that's weird to me. I had someone go to me, well, you don't know what's in it. I go, yeah, I don't know what the 13 special spices in the Kentucky Fried Chicken is either. But I still get that. I don't know what the vaccines of the past I got or either. You don't know what's in virtually anything that you touch or consume, yet you don't seem to have a problem with it. And here's the thing. You don't seem to have a problem ingesting, what was it, the hydroxychloroquine, well, that was part of it. Then it was the bleach, get some bleach. Then it was shove a light up your behind. And yesterday it was drink urine. I'm like, well, wait a second. I mean, I got to wonder if there is someone out there who, walk with me, if you will, on this journey. Because, I had this moment today where I'm thinking about the act. Imagine that you listened to Donald Trump and said, you know what, if you just injected, a light into your body, and there's only a couple of orifices that you can put a light in. Imagine that second right before you're deciding, is this the right idea, or should I just get the vaccine? Imagine you've got that cup full of bleach, and you're ready to go, yep, this is the way to clear my innards. Or worse yet, the guy yesterday, as you've got that cup of steaming urine, and you're bringing it up to your lips, and then you get that smell, that kind of like in a men's bathroom in a public park that hasn't been flushed for a while, and you're beginning to go, is there a moment before you actually drink it that you go, maybe I just get the vaccine? Is all of this worth it? I mean, you think of all of the insanity on, we're going to find a bunch of reasons why not to. My favorite story was a couple of months ago, right when the vaccine mandate came out. You may remember this, right when President Biden said we're going to have a mandate. People, you keep your jobs, you're going to have to get the vaccine. There were actually people there who go, fine, we'll go get the mandate. We'll go get the vaccine, but we're going to get it out of us. And there were hundreds of ways of people doing weird stuff to get it out of them. Slicing themselves with knives and, all kinds of, blood therapy and bloodletting. And you go, crazy stuff. And you go, this is why education, we need better funding. We need better funded education because we've got a populace that you go, I'm sorry, you're going to literally drink urine before getting a vaccine. Do you know what's in that? I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm at this point where I'm imagining someone in that moment going, yeah, I'm going to do this. Frightening. Now, for our folks in Chicago, your mayor, Mayor Lightfoot, evidently she announced today that she has tested positive for the virus. She said that she's experiencing cold-like symptoms, but otherwise feels fine, which she credits with being vaccinated and boosted. And good for her. I would hope that she is vaccinated and boosted. She said she's going to continue to work from home while following CDC guidelines for isolation. This is an urgent reminder for folks to get vaccinated and boosted. It's the only way to beat the pandemic. I now put that into context with the Chicago Teachers Union, who for the last couple of days has been saying, look, we want to do the remote thing for a few days to let things kind of tap down, kind of get us the ability to work from home, let the virus kind of ease its way out, do some testing stuff. Lots of heat nationally. Lots. Now, this is where I want people closest to the problem making the decisions. But evidently on Wednesday, classes will resume because the heat was a lot. As the 700-member House of Delegates voted 398 to 226 in favor of suspending their work action and returning to the classrooms. I gotta wonder. This again is one of those things where I gotta wonder what then happens, because I look at in Philadelphia where I know a number of people there. They say the infrastructure is not there to get the testing supplies. The infrastructure is not there to do the tracing or any of that. And I know friends who are going, every day we're getting emails from the school. There's 10 more cases, there's 15 more cases, and things are happening. If you're in a school district that doesn't have the resources, this could get out of hand really quickly. I believe in the erring on the side of caution. I didn't say that we should be suspending school indefinitely, but during this spike period, maybe for a couple of days while it's raging, maybe, since you have the ability, especially in an area that is raging. I'm not saying universally shut everything down, but in certain places might not be the dumbest thing to do. Just my thoughts. Today, a little fun. And again, I'd love to hear yours. You can give us a yell, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. I look at Dr. Fauci today. I'm not a Fauci fan. I'm not against him, but I'm not a big, fanboy. But I got to tell you, the guy today, impressed me. Because Rand Paul again did his spiel going after him and attacking him. Roger Marshall from Kansas did the same thing, of which the viral moment was off mic. I guess Fauci said that the senator from Kansas was a moron, and I agree. I think most of America would agree, and I'll get to that in a little bit because, but the Rand Paul thing. He finally, just went off on Rand Paul. He said, quote, what happens when he gets out and accuses me of things that are completely untrue is all of a sudden that kindles the crazies out there, and I have life threats upon my life, harassment of my family and my children with obscene phone calls. So whenever Rand Paul goes on these rants, Fauci's the problem, some serious things happen. Now, this is where I love what Fauci did. He's speaking back to Rand Paul, he goes, you just do the same thing at every hearing. We're here at a committee to look at the virus now that has killed almost 900,000 people, and you keep coming back to personal attacks on me that have absolutely no relevance to reality. He said, go to Rand Paul's website and you see Fire Dr. Fauci with a little box that says contribute here. You can do $5, $10, $20, $100. So you are making a catastrophic epidemic for your political gain. And I'm glad someone finally points this out, because the right wing has been doing this, pretty much the entire Biden administration. I get emails every day going, Biden's really screwing this up. Donate $5 here so we can throw him out. And you go, but you're the guys who are saying don't do what we need to do to get this under control. You're the ones who are saying, drink the bleach. You're the ones who are saying, don't get the vaccine. You're the ones who are saying all this crazy stuff where you just go, folks, just get the vaccine. It doesn't seem that difficult. You listen to some of the right wing. I was listening to some right wing radio the other day, and this idea, masks are tyranny. What's her name? What's that crazy woman who basically said Marjorie Taylor Greene? Which again, you go, I don't know how this woman is still in Congress, and I hope the people in her district throw her out. But the mask mandate in the House, she's saying, is just like the Holocaust. You go, really? I don't think you know what the Holocaust is. But yet, according to her, man, it is that. And you've got Republicans who are holding large gatherings. Trump's gonna have a big shindig. And look, I'm not all that thrilled with Biden having big shindigs. But my favorite, I keep going back to, masks are communism and mandates are communism. Oh, it's just the flu, we'll be fine. I can't tell you how many times I've had people tell me, but Rick, it's just like the flu. You're going to get a little sick, you'll be fine. And yet what you find out is, and I've seen this firsthand in our local little rural hospital, is, the hospital's full, and it's full of people who are unvaccinated. And this is where I have come back to the reality of going, I don't actually care. And you go, oh, I can't believe you said that. What good God-fearing liberal would ever say such a thing? I've been in this place for a long while. People who know me know I don't, you want to do something stupid, that's on you. I tell my kids this all the time. You do something dumb, I'll make sure you get the treatment that you need, but you don't get sympathy. In fact, my son still tells me about the one time we went to a conference. I took him to a conference with me, and he ran up the escalator in the wrong way and fell, and he got a good jab in his leg from the little prongy things. And he was, on the verge of crying, and he knew he wasn't getting any sympathy. But I got him the health care he needed. I got him all wrapped up and taken care of. And there was no, oh, you poor baby. You did something dumb. Did you learn from it? And he goes, yep, run faster next time. And I go, yep, it's a lesson. It's not the one I was hoping for, but it's a lesson. But this is where I'm at. I have no sympathy for these folks at this point. We can do without you. And what we're seeing is the people who are dying overwhelmingly are the unvaccinated. And I know that sounds cold-hearted. It's probably going to be bad for my karma. But ultimately, you've made a choice. And I'm a big fan of choices and living with those choices and being responsible for those choices. I'm now waiting for the healthcare system to go, sorry, we're full and we have to make choices, which means we're going to relegate you back to the parking garages. Scary, scary times. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the show, grab the podcast over at thericksmithshow.com. Share it with your friends. Follow us on social media, all that stuff. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day the Battle of the Running Bulls occurred at GM's Fisher Plant No. 2 in Flint, Michigan. It marked the turning point in the Great Flint sit-down strike. Company guards attempted to stop food deliveries to the strikers. When confronted, the guards cleared out and the food deliveries resumed. The guards, however, reported to the local police that strikers were holding them captive. The Flint police soon arrived, throwing tear gas into the picket lines and through plant windows. The sit-downers responded with plant fire hoses and slingshots loaded with door hinges. The police continued to launch tear gas at the picketers. Then the crowd pelted police with any debris they could find. It was at this point that the police began firing indiscriminately into the crowd, seriously wounding 16. Glenora Johnson of the Women's Auxiliary, speaking from the sound truck, called her women to action. She recollected in 1976, quote, that when I appealed to the women of Flint, I said, there are women down here, the mothers of children, and I beg you to come down here and stand with your husbands, your loved ones, your brothers, your sweethearts. Then I saw the first woman struggling, and I noticed when she started to break through and come down that a cop grabbed her coat, and she just kept coming. As soon as that happened, other women broke through, and the cops did not want to fire into the backs of women. When the women did that, the men came naturally, and that was the end of the battle. The Women's Auxiliary would continue to play a vital role throughout the strike.
Sit down, you keep your feet. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down, you gotta think. Sit down, sit down.
For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Yes, more subpoenas. Yes, sir. The January 6th committee has issued 3 new subpoenas. Andy Suburban, I guess is his name, Arthur Schwartz. These are folks who were advisors to Don Jr. I don't know why he had advisors, to be honest, but evidently they've been subpoenaed along with Ross Worthington. Evidently Ross helped write the speech on January 6th there at the Ellipse. Still nothing on my Congressman Scott Perry. I'm still waiting for that subpoena to happen. I hope that will, along with Jim Jordan and Sean Hannity. If you're not going to voluntarily come forward and cooperate, it's time to start making people. And my Congressman, Scott Perry, he most certainly should be forced to testify. Just my thoughts. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on, well, maybe a little bit about the subpoenas. Maybe the guy who's in this spot and how we get him out. That's why I've asked Eugene DePasquale to come talk with us. Eugene is a former Auditor General here in Pennsylvania and a good friend of the show. Eugene, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely, Rick, and hey, Happy New Year to you. I never know when the exact date is that you're supposed to stop saying Happy New Year. I don't know if there's we should get a federal designation as the date you can stop saying Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year. I'm already past it. I'm on the let's get things done. All the niceties and the festivities are over. The Christmas trees are coming down. Let's get to work. And one of them is, let's start right there. I mean, you ran last time, a very close election that Scott Perry won. I don't think people saw him for who he is. Right. I'm thinking, I don't know, this January 6th stuff, this is who he is.
Look, there's clearly a lot more there. The reason why the commission has asked him and other members of Congress, including Jim Jordan, to testify is like, that is so uncommon that they know he was a significant player. Look, he was in the Oval Office on the 5th. And for Congress, look, they've obviously requested he and Jim Jordan and others come talk. If they don't, they have to be subpoenaed or this commission won't be taken seriously.
No, I mean, you absolutely have to hold these folks accountable, especially the fact that he was the conduit to help getting some of those people that were going to help pull off the memos and the PowerPoint bits.
Look, if you will, look, I served with Scott in the General Assembly. Always knew he was conservative, but this is obviously a whole different level. Now that we're seeing this is who he is, and he was willing to overthrow an election for pure power, and that's who he is.
No, and like you said, I've had him on the program in the past. He was always to the right. This is a whole different bet.
Right.
This is the kind of stuff that this isn't democratic this isn't small d democratic. Right. This isn't small d democracy. This is on the side of, I don't know,
authoritarian. Let's call it. It's authoritarianism.
Exactly. I was going to use the F word, but a little. It's moving us in that direction though.
Yeah. It's bad stuff. It's bad stuff, and it's dangerous for the country. That is no secret. Anyone that doesn't see how dangerous this is, and the people like Perry and Jim Jordan and others, then they're literally they're not opening their eyes.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I want to see him go. I want to see what he did. I want to know what he did. He is my representative. There is a responsibility to we the people to know what he did, when he did it, and how he did it as our representative. That's so right. That come next election time, whether you're in or not, and I don't know if you're going to do it again or not. I give you credit if you do, but whoever does, we need to know who Scott Perry is before. Because I think the last time you were on, you said it perfectly. Most people look at him as, a nice guy. He's fairly amiable. Not this. I think this is a whole level of problem.
Absolutely. Look, and he is, and even though he beat me, he's my congressman too. He owes the public answers on this.
Yeah. So I did want to ask you, and I want, this wasn't the reason I had you on. I just have to bring this up because it's important that, you know, I've got a sitting congressman who represents me, who I believe was part of the planning the insurrection, part of the possible overthrow of our government, a possible coup attempt. I think that's important for our listeners and for me to know as a voter as well. So I had to ask you. But I also wanted to turn the page a little bit. Over the holidays, saw you a little bit of internet fame. There was evidently the TikTok, the Instagram. There you were.
So it's something basically out of a movie. My son and I, we fly in. We're going to go see Pitt, Michigan State Peach Bowl, and we get a nice dinner. And we're walking over, and you're in Georgia, like, oh, we got to get Georgia peanuts here. So before the third quarter starts, I go out looking for the peanuts, and as people have seen, and now over 10 million people have seen this video, these two knuckleheads are in an argument, fight, and a guy. And again, it's only funny because it's so ridiculous, but thankfully she wasn't seriously hurt, although she was hurt. At point blank range, the one guy throws a punch and misses and hits the woman and knocks her over. And she goes down, and then I come in, and obviously, as we now know, there's about 300 people filming the thing, leaving it to the 50-year-old 165-pound guy. Yeah, I do cross and all that other stuff, but I mean, let's be clear, I'm not George Foreman here. I would have liked to have a little bit of backup there. I'm covering her up. And then I had thought, at least if you're going to like knock a woman down, maybe that'd be the time to say, okay, folks, this has gone on far enough, and hey, I'll buy somebody a beer. This is over. No, they kept going. And then they come on top of me, her, us, still throwing blows. I'm getting hit by an elbow and a knee. People go, did it hurt? I said, thank God it wasn't Conor McGregor. I mean, we'd probably be having a lot different conversation. But she did have a mild concussion. She's fine, but it is thankful that I was able to cover her up, because with those two throwing blows on top of her, God only knows what would have happened. But,
yeah, I watched the video and I'm like, why is she in the middle of this? Let the two idiots beat each other up. Right. Maybe they beat each other unconscious, and you don't have to deal with either one of them.
Yeah. Oh, there is zero chance, without me knowing either one of them, that I was going to get in the middle of two drunks fighting over who cut in front of who in the concession stand. But once she went down, I helped. But I'm sitting around going like, these two people are knuckleheads. Like, and the press asked, what were they fighting over? I'm like, climate change? What do you think they're fighting over? Who cut in front of who in front of? They're both probably drunk at the concession stand. I mean, dear God.
Yeah, it was funny. But the funniest part of it is the guy who did the basketball swoosh move or whatever that was.
That's like I said. It was out of a movie. When I went back, my son said, hey, where are the peanuts? I'm like, you won't believe what happened. And I think he thought I was exaggerating. And then he sees the video. It's like, you weren't kidding. I was like, I tried to tell you what happened.
So the reason I bring it up is, maybe this is a campaign video.
Right.
Here was a guy who jumped in because you didn't hesitate. You're calling, hey, get somebody, and you jumped in to help the woman. I mean, that's a good story.
Look, on a serious note, I was just glad I could help. There was no hesitation on my part when she went down. As you can see, when she went down, I jumped right in. That's how we were raised.
Yeah, I mean, I would have pulled her aside. I'd have gotten her out. I wouldn't have stopped them at all. But it is a testament to our society, though, as you pointed out. Everybody whipped out their phone and they're recording because there are a bunch of views of it. Not a lot of people jumping in the middle.
No, the one that is, again, sad but funny, if you're willing to take a dark comedic view of this thing, is there is a guy that is on his way in to help, but his phone is charging and he realizes his extension won't take him to help out. And then he's like, oh, I don't want to lose my charge. And that was it. I was like, so I almost had some help. I know, like, yeah. What are you gonna do? It's like you laugh or cry. What are you gonna do?
Hey, he gave it his best. I guess the length of the cord, that is his best. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Eugene DePasquale, former Pennsylvania Auditor General. You want to check out his website, and if you want to encourage him to run for Congress, EugeneForCongress.com. I know I'm encouraging him. And I know that I'll be one of the folks donating to help him because my congressman got to go. Just my thoughts. Now, you did have an interesting piece on cyber charter schools, which is an interesting segue from the fun of the craziness of drunken people fighting. Maybe a little education would have helped them stay out of that. But Pennsylvania is one of the worst places in the country for cyber charter schools. Taxpayers are fleeced every year, and we don't get the outcomes we need. Students end up losing so many opportunities. And I know you wanted to talk about it. So walk me through what it is you have as a plan on how to rein some of this in.
So Rick, yeah, thanks. This is obviously the main reason we reached out. As Auditor General, I was aggressive in auditing, both our brick and mortar charter cyber schools, obviously your traditional public schools. And we have, to be blunt, the worst charter school law in the country. And what's happening with cyber charters is, even more egregious, which is basically it doesn't matter what the cost of educating the child is. They actually bill, and this is how the law is, they're actually following the law based on where the kid is from. So there's a kid going to a cyber school that's based in, say, central part of the state, but they're from the Philadelphia suburbs. It's costing taxpayers over $20,000. This is costing us tens of millions of dollars a year. And this system of how we fund these cyber charter schools has to be reformed. And parents, I think, understandably want choice for their kids, but we got to make sure it's quality choice. We're also not getting the outcomes we need as well, whereas kids that go to the cyber schools simply aren't meeting the same standards. And to be fair, not only your traditional public schools, but also brick and mortar charter. So we've got a real problem here with the cyber schools.
Yeah, I was looking at one of the numbers that the amount of taxpayer dollars that go to these charter schools and these cyber charters, something like $3 billion. Yeah. And I'm like, look, I'm not with you on the choice issue. Yeah. What I want is a really good choice. Yeah. I want my local school to be the absolute best it can be. I want it to do the things that we need it to do and to educate people. I think the more we divide the pie and we split things up to everyone's pet project here and there, we dilute the whole pool and nothing gets done. So for me, I want a really good neighborhood public school that my kids can walk to. It's part of the community. It's all of that. Instead of these gimmicks that keep popping up. And look, Philadelphia is just rife with, crime and abuse and all across the state. And we never seem to really get a handle on it. And we just keep pouring money down the drain. And look, here's my last point on it. Yeah, it's just money. At the end of the day, it's just money on one hand. But on the other hand, these kids get one shot at an education.
That's right.
And if we screw that one shot up, we're going to be taking care of them for a lifetime, whether it's in prison or through welfare programs, because they're not going to get the help, the education, and the skills that they need to help take care of themselves. And I know I sound kind of curmudgeon-y, but this is really very serious.
No, and the kids that miss out on this education, and look, and even during the pandemic, I mean, the kids that, that went into these systems, they don't get another shot at this thing. And so then they end up, whether it be lacking skills going for a trade school or community college or college and beyond, there's no question that they miss out. You don't get a second chance at your K through 12 education here. And I also believe, and look, I know there's some kids that learn differently, but I also believe that it's more than just the books when you're in school. It's the camaraderie, getting to know other kids, learning those social skills, learning how to interact with adults. It's more than just the books. And look, at the books are important, but to me, again, whether it be K through 12 or college, the actual academic part is a piece to the puzzle. But there's all those other life skills that go with it that I just don't think you get in the cyber world.
No, I'm right there with you. The reality is, and I say this all the time, the only reason I finished high school, and this is, take it how it is, the only reason I finished high school is because I played football. At the time, I was living with my grandparents. My mother had passed away. I had no interest whatsoever in anything. And it was athletics. It was those extracurriculars that kept me interested. And that got me to the end of the road.
And you had to probably maintain a certain GPA just to be able to play.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was that kept me coming to class and kept me at least in that direction. And I'm grateful for that. It's because they had the resources to be able to have sports programs and extracurricular and wood shop and all kinds of different things. They weren't splintered off. And I noticed, and one of the things that, one of the numbers that I had seen pointed out, that the cost of cyber charters and these things, school districts are paying what was it, 253% increase over the last 12 years, some outrageous number, while their enrollment hasn't even gone up close to half that.
While we have actual teachers who are forced to buy supplies for their own classrooms, who in some districts aren't even getting raises, where you have property taxes mostly going up mostly because of this. And that's not to say every school board and every school district makes every decision right. But that number you're pointing out is why a lot of the property taxes have gone up as well, because it's not actually going to the local district in many instances.
So as a former state representative, as former auditor general, as a concerned parent, what's the direction we should be going? Because I've said before, we've tried these gimmicks. They've all failed in my view. The studies are out there. I mean, Stanford did the conclusive study on it that most of the charters do probably just as well as the public school. A couple do better and a lot do worse. So for me, it's the idea we should be building one institution that if you got different learning needs, we accommodate for that.
We can deal with that. Right. The simplest way to deal with this is the Department of Education actually has the power when a cyber charter school is, because they're the ones, not the local district. They're the ones that deal with reauthorizing the cyber charter. If they're not meeting the academic needs, they can simply just decertify them, and that would be a way to tackle this.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the amount of money that gets siphoned off into other things.
Yeah.
I want my tax dollars that are supposed to go to education to actually go to education.
That's right.
Is that too much to ask?
It's not. It's actually what it should be.
So how do we get to this point? I know I only got about a minute left. This is a state level issue on a certain level. We've got a Republican legislature hell bent on privatizing public education. We're in this weird kind of world, Eugene. How do we deal with this?
Until we get enough oomph to actually get a reform bill on the spending through the legislature, and that is admittedly going to be a little while. Department of Ed needs to bring the hammer on a lot of these schools and just decertify them, the one that aren't meeting their academic credentials.
So do you have faith in Biden's guy, because he was a charter school guy there?
No, the state Department of Education can actually do that. It's that you could get that done in the state. That is actually a tool that exists right now.
And how do we get a hold of that person? I guess let's find that person.
That's right. That is where the effort needs to be pushed, along with getting this spending reform through the legislature. But that's admittedly going to at least take a turn.
Good stuff as always, Eugene. I appreciate the time. Again, I'm pushing you. Need a candidate in the 10th there. Need somebody, and I hope folks will check out your website, Eugene for Congress, to help push in that direction. But I appreciate you taking some time for us.
You got it, Rick. Thanks for everything. Have a great night. I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Good stuff. Eugene DePasquale. Again, check out the website, eugeneforcongress.org. And as I said, make sure you a little push. I'm trying to get there. But at the end of the day, you look at some of these basic crimes. There was the one in Philadelphia that it was a charter school that acted as kind of like a strip club at night. So, school during the day, strip club at night. There was another one, a cyber charter school, that they promised, laptops and printers and, internet access and all kinds of stuff. None of the kids got it. And for like 2-3 years, none of the kids got it, but they had 100% attendance. You know who got what? Well, the cyber charter got all the money. The kids didn't get an education. And sadly, those kids are the ones that lose out, which, again, another reason why I'm against the idea of splitting up into these gimmicky ideas, because they don't seem to ever really work out. But the moneyed interest, Education Incorporated, they always seem to do pretty well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day a strike launched one of the most iconic rallying cries of the U.S. labor movement. 20,000, mostly women workers, in the Lawrence, Massachusetts textile mills began what became known as the Bread and Roses Strike. Led by the industrial workers of the world, the strike was one of the most important events in the history of women workers. The phrase bread and roses had been used a year earlier by poet John Oppenheim. He published his poem in the American Magazine. His first verse read, "As we come marching, marching, in the beauty of the day, 1,000,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses, for the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses." The second stanza continued, "As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead, go crying through our singing, their ancient cry for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits knew. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too." The poem described a call by workers not just for bread or better wages for the basic needs of life. It also called for roses, a life that could include time for beauty and meaning. In 1976, Mimi Farina, the sister of Joan Baez, put the lyrics to music. In 2000, a filmmaker used the title Bread and Roses for his story of unionization efforts of Mexican workers in Los Angeles. And for the past century, the image of Bread and Roses has continued to capture the imagination of working people standing up for their rights.
As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days. For the rising of the women means the
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I kind of like this story over at the Hill. I'm finding it kind of funny, actually. Evidently, the fourth-ranking House Democrat, Assistant Speaker Catherine Clark of Massachusetts, evidently she has urged the Sergeant of Arms to enforce the mask mandate in the chamber, because evidently on the floor of the House you have to wear a mask, and for those who violate that, she thinks that fines aren't enough. She wants to require people who don't wear the mask to be put into isolation boxes. And I'm kind of like, yeah, dunce boxes for Congress. Who could be against that? Here to share some thoughts on, well, are dunce boxes possible? I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Representative and political analyst Bob Ney to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So what do you think? Are dunce boxes possible?
Look, a lot of things don't make sense. Look at what they named the committees, intelligence committees. In Congress, think about that for a second. Why would they use the word intelligence?
Yeah.
So, maybe they would have dunce boxes. I don't know. But I saw that story, and I just thought it was interesting that she said it. And I don't know. I don't know where would they put the dunce boxes.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at this going, this is a novel concept.
Well, I chaired House Administration, and of course, if I was in the Congress back now, I would be actually dealing with those requests. I should write a book on requests made by members. They're interesting. Let me put it that way.
No, you should. I mean, I've often said you've got some of the most fabulous stories, which is why we love having you on often, to kind of, give us an insider's view of just how crazy things can be there.
Right, exactly.
But I can't imagine how much crazier it is now with the lunatics like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and the ilk that there are. I can't imagine.
Well, also, when you look at this issue, besides the dunce boxes, but when you look at this issue, there are House rules. And, we had to enforce them. Steny Hoyer and I, he was my ranking member. After Steny was John Larson of Connecticut. He was my ranking member. And together we had to enforce House rules. And there are House rules, whether you can wear a hat or you can't, whether you wear a tie or you don't. There's these rules. And this is what really kills me. Those rules, even by some of the, quote, crazies, were followed. And if there's a mask rule, it's a rule. And, you sign a piece of paper, by the way, when you're sworn in on election, after, your election, and you get sworn in the House. Rick, you immediately sign, after you take your oath, this piece of paper about pledging you won't divulge any secrets from classified briefings, right? Okay, some members refused to sign that. And when we had briefings, I would go up to them and because I was a member, and very politely say, you haven't signed.
You got to go.
You can't be here.
Yep.
And I would do that to spare them the embarrassment of the Sergeant of Arms coming up to them and escorting them out. But that was the rule, whether they liked it or they didn't. There was two that would never sign them,
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean,
we wouldn't let him into the hearings.
Yeah, I mean, but that was an era where rules mattered, or at least you had some
Something.
what's the word I'm looking for? Some reverence for the position, some bit of historical perseverance. I'm not sure how to put that, but you some high esteem, some reverence for the position. That it's more than just you. The folks today, they don't have that. All they care about is tearing things down and getting their way. Like children, having a fit in the cereal aisle
and getting cute on the floor.
Yeah.
With things. You're right. We had a protocol and we had precedent that was set, and we were flexible in trying to take into account of members' attitudes and feelings, and if they wanted to change a rule, we'd talk about it. But once the rule was set, the rule's set. And so I don't understand. I don't know. I guess I'm from a different era. I am pro
Dunce
defy this.
I am pro Dunce box. I say that's where we go, and we could use it for a lot of things.
On that, I'm with you.
Let's move along. Interesting, some story out of Florida. Florida's 20th Congressional District has been decided. Sheila Cheerfuss, I guess that's how you say it, McCormick, she has beaten a field of Republicans. What I find interesting and why this story got my attention is the guy who lost, the Broward County Commissioner Dale Holness. He's the Republican. He is, I guess, now suing to overturn the election and he is claiming that she didn't file her financial disclosures, which I don't know if she did or not, but accusing her of bribing voters by promising a $1,000 monthly stimulus package. Can you sue for someone for saying we're gonna move on a policy because you view that as, is that something you can sue over?
No, you can't. She's a progressive Democrat, and she campaigned on sending Americans a monthly $1,000 check. Now, Yang had supported that when he ran for president. And no, you can look when you're running. Many members of Congress for decades would stand up and say, if you elect me, I'm going to return highway dollars to the state.
Going to bring the bacon home.
I'm going to return highway dollars. I'm going to bring you that $58 million highway. Now, were they offering a bribe to their constituents? No. And the $1,000 is a policy. So, no, he can't sue. I mean, absolutely cannot sue her for that. And also, by the way, he cannot sue her for not filing, I don't know what she filed or didn't file. I don't know. But if she didn't file an ethics report, then he can't sue her for that. She can be censured, fined, something of that nature, and she'd have to correct it, but he cannot sue her, and the election cannot be overturned. And let me say one thing about elections, because I love when people bring this up. Well, she cheated on the ethics form and didn't fill it out, and we're going to sue and overturn the election. A Secretary of State, and this is why they're so important. Remember Catherine Harris of Florida?
Absolutely.
A Secretary of State hands you a certificate. When they hand you that certificate, you take that certificate to the U.S. House and you present it to the clerk, and that is how you are seated. Now, interestingly enough, Elsie Hastings, who she replaced, who was a really good friend of mine in Congress, little 2-second history on Elsie Hastings. He was impeached as a federal judge by the Congress. He turned around and he ran for Congress. And you know what they said to Elsie?
What?
We're not going to seat you. And Elsie showed up with his certificate, and he got seated.
That's the right thing to do. He won the election. Right. He represents those people.
So that's what happened. A little history on the seat that she's running for. So when anybody says they're not going to seat her or she's going to be stopped and she's going to be sued, forget it. She can't be sued for that.
See, now I saw it in this. We're never going to, in my view, never going to see a Republican concede again. There's always going to be some claim of cheating, and I'm going to sue, and it's going to all. This is what I think, sadly, for the short term, I hope it's short term, this is the direction I fear things are going to go.
Right.
But I just found that very interesting.
Well, you hear that all the time about the lawsuits and members suing members, and you can't be sued also for official acts.
Yeah.
You can't be sued for it. You can't be sued for how you vote.
But it gets an interesting headline. So there's a headline here.
I know, it always does.
There it
I
is.
think Boehner sued people all the time, too. He filed lawsuits. So.
Nuts. I wanted to get your thoughts on California. Evidently, Gavin Newsom is saying that he wants California to be the first state to provide health care coverage to all immigrants in the country, legal or illegal. Thoughts?
Well, I think that we have to recognize whether somebody is legal or illegal. When it comes to health care, if they walk into an emergency room, they're going to be treated because they're coming into an emergency room system. Now, California's, they call it Med-Cal system, already covers young immigrants until they're 26. So they've had that for, I think, probably a pretty decent period of time. And currently, income-eligible immigrants without legal, ability status qualify for some, sort of coverage. I'll call it light, Cali Med Light coverage. So that's already been happening in the system in California. And then if you cover them, because we can argue whether they should be here or not, but since they're here, if you cover them, that allows the hospitals to not eat the uncompensated care. Otherwise, the hospitals will, treat them and pay for the care anyway.
Yeah, or put them in a cab and drop on Skid Row, as one of the hospitals in Los Angeles got caught doing.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. It was a while ago. They were wondering why on Skid Row there were so many people walking around with hospital gowns, and they found that the hospitals were putting them in the cabs and dropping them miles away because they didn't want to treat them.
I didn't know that.
But here's the thing. I have some conservative friends losing their mind over this, and you go, every other industrialized country does this for people who are in their country because it's the right thing to do. In fact, I had a friend who told me he was in France a number of years ago, and he was sick. And he said, they sent a doctor to his hotel room. They sent a pharmacy person. They sent someone to check on him. All this stuff. And it cost him like $85, out of his pocket for the whole thing, for all of this care, and which, he said was, not horrible. But they actually came to the hospital and took care of him because they didn't want him walking around sick. It's a very different way of thinking of how to take care of people.
Well, I've taken Americans who have traveled to India, and they've got, they've become ill. One of them fell down, and I've taken them, to the hospital, and they're treated.
Yeah.
Over there.
We just have this view of, no, we're going to cut them off. Also wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that Governor Newsom has announced the intention to manufacture and distribute insulin. Evidently, he thinks the state of California is going to make and distribute some insulin. I don't think this is a bad idea.
No, not at all. Anything that a state can do to pursue manufacturing is good, whatever it is. But if they want to manufacture insulin and it helps reduce the costs for people that have diabetes, I think it's a great program.
Yeah, especially because, as you point out, they've got that healthcare. They've got their healthcare system, one of the biggest in the world, even because California is a huge state. How much do you think this could save them to manufacture and distribute their own insulin and cut out the for-profit industry?
Well, right, and so what they're going to be doing is that they're going to, with this manufacturing of insulin, they're going to offer it at a reduced cost. No question about it. Yeah. Insulin is something so vital, and it shouldn't be bankrupting you to get it.
No, the weird thing is,
in fact, I think he's got it. I think he has it, Rick, as part of the California budget for this year.
Oh, I didn't see that, but that's a good thing.
Right.
Look, at the end of the day, I think you got to do something because we're evidently not going to get the Build Back Better plan pushed through, which would have capped insulin costs at $35 as part of what I understand. And then, look, I had someone who texted me, when I put out a comment on Twitter about hey, this is a tax on insulin and all this stuff, and he said, look, he paid for his two kids like $450 a month for insulin and testing supplies and stuff. And I'm going, it's just completely outrageous that no one should have to be put in that position.
A single vial of some of the insulins, I don't know which names, but can cost around $300.
Wow.
$300.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Bob Ney, former Ohio Congressman, political analyst, one of my key gurus of everything Congress. I wanted to get your thoughts today on President Biden's spiel down in Atlanta. What did you think of his speech?
Well, I thought he was aggressive and needs to be aggressive. He's going to get some frustration from people because, when he says, well, we need to do something with the filibuster to pass the voting rights, they need to do something with the filibuster to pass anything, these days.
Right.
But he's out there and he's trying to put some of the bully pulpit behind the filibuster. Now, look, a lot of people in that Senate, both sides of the aisle, including the president, when he was a senator, resisted changes. Depends, the stoic Senate system, the proper, I call it the peacock farm sometimes, they have this whole cloture and this procedure and the filibuster like it's a constitutional, effort. And it's not. It's a rule, and it can be undone. So I think the president's taken the right position. He's altered some of his position because it's now being used to stop changes that are good for democracy.
Yep, we need
so
to get it done.
I thought he needed to come out swinging on it. And now, of course, it's going to be up to Senator Schumer to see what he can do with this, whether it's a partial filibuster. I like what you say about actually forcing people to do what the idea of the filibuster originally was.
Yep, start talking. It's that
read
simple.
the Bible and the phone book and everything else.
Yep. But I think you should have to stay on topic. That's the difference. I don't want you reading the phone book. I want you telling me why and actually presenting the arguments instead of just holding up time. That's just my view. But as always, Bob, I appreciate the time. Great stuff as usual.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. Seriously, I'm a big fan of a talking filibuster, but I think you have to stay on topic. I think it's one of those things that I don't want you just holding up things just to hold things up. Explain to me why. Bring in experts. Have a whole political theater show if you want. Singers and dancers telling me why raising the minimum wage is bad for the economy. And then let's have an actual debate over it. That's what how this is supposed to work. Just saying I don't like it. I'm sorry. That's not how this game is supposed to be played. Just my thoughts. And remember, back when they reauthorized the Voting Rights Act back in 2006, 16 Republicans, many of them still there today, voted to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act, and yet not one of them has voted to move on voting rights now. I think it tells you something. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Like, subscribe, share, all of that stuff. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
The morning after December's horrific nighttime tornado smashed a huge Amazon warehouse in Illinois, killing 6 workers, corporate CEO Jeff Bezos issued a personal video message. Was he distressed and sorrowful? No, Boss Bezos was perversely giddy. That's because the narcissistic billionaire had not made the video to mourn the deaths, but instead had chosen this hour of tragedy to gloat to the world that his private space tourism business had just rocketed a small group of extremely rich thrill seekers on a 10-minute joyride. The popular information newsletter reports that a grinning Bezos, dressed in a pretend astronaut costume, exclaimed that everybody involved was really happy. Back on planet Earth, though, the families and co-workers of the employees crushed when Amazon's cheaply built structure collapsed on them were not happy with him. It took Bezos some 12 hours after his self-congratulatory media event before he finally issued a perfunctory tweet professing to be, quote, heartbroken over the loss of our teammates. But they weren't lost, they were killed by a deliberate corporate culture that routinely cuts corners on worker safety to put more profit in corporate pockets. First, the building itself was thrown up quickly with cheap pre-assembled 40-foot-high concrete walls that collapse inward in a tornado. Second, Amazon's employees were expected to stay on the job that night, even though there was a high risk of tornadoes. Third, nearly all of the workers were classified as contractors, letting Amazon dodge liability for on-the-job harm. This is Jim Hightower saying, oh, and those dead workers were not his teammates, as he so cynically called them. Even the high-flying captain doesn't treat teammates as throwaway units, carelessly sacrificing their lives for a few more dollars in corporate profit. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.